Hello and welcome to episode 6 of How to Be Catholic at Home. Today's episode is on the home altar. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, this is not an altar the way that we have the altar at church where the Eucharist is prepared. Rather, this is a focal point of prayer at home, something that we can have in our own home space to help give some direction and some inspiration for our prayer time. So in the early church, before Christians were able to or allowed to build physical church buildings, people would pray in their homes. They were called the home churches. And even in those times before we were building fancy standalone church buildings, the ancient form of prayer was to direct ourselves toward the east. Why might that be? The rising sun in the morning was seen as a symbol of Jesus' second coming, that someday the Son of God, the S-O-N of God, would return. And he would return as the sun rises in the east. And so the rising sun was seen as a symbol of the resurrection. So the early church usually would pray facing the east as a symbol of looking forward to the return of the Son of God. Now, a lot of early churches were built so that the altar was facing towards the east. That's called ad orientem. And then over time, that became less and less common to literally be facing towards the east. But the idea of having a direction for prayer, of sort of pointing ourselves towards God, has remained and is a part of the way churches are built to this very day. So even in our home, even though if we don't necessarily have our home altar on the eastern wall of our house or our room, it is still a way for us to point ourselves, our direction towards God in a physical way with our body, which helps us orient our hearts and our minds toward the Lord. So what might one include in your home altar? Definitely, I would suggest having a crucifix or a cross. The cross is the most basic symbol of Christianity, and for good reason. We look to the cross as the symbol of Jesus' sacrifice. We also look to the cross as the symbol of what Jesus has conquered. He has conquered death. He made the awful tree of the cross into the trophy of his victory over sin and death. So a cross. Perhaps some prayer material. What's going to take up sort of the meat, the bulk of your prayer time? Are you going to be reading your Bible? Are you going to be doing the readings from your daily missal? Do you have some other kind of prayer book or spiritual reading? It's a great thing to have at your home altar. I would also highly encourage the use of some sacramentals. I'm sort of overemphasizing this idea of lowercase s because I want to differentiate between the 7 sacraments and sacramentals. And so the church actually gives us, this is a quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church from paragraph 1669, sacramentals derive from the baptismal priesthood. So the priesthood of all believers, not just the sacramental priests like me, but every baptized person. They derive from the baptismal priesthood. Every baptized person is called to be a blessing and to bless. Hence, lay people may preside at certain blessings. And then the paragraph continues. I'm not going to go fully into this next section from the Catechism, but I just wanted to draw attention to the connection between sacramentals and the 7 sacraments. Sacramentals, they help prepare us to receive grace and dispose us to cooperate with it. So the prayer that we do at home, even all by ourselves or with our family, that makes us even better able to cooperate and to receive the graces that we receive when we're at church, participating in the, we could say, capital S sacraments, especially the sacrament of the Most Holy Eucharist. So what are some sacramentals that we could include? The most basic, and probably my first suggestion, would be holy water. I'll do a whole video about how to use holy water in your prayer. Holy water, number 1, reminds us of our baptisms. It's also a way for us to bless and ask God's blessing on ourselves and our home and our loved ones. There's all kinds of wonderful things you can do with holy water. Very similar to holy water is blessed salt. We can sprinkle blessed salt. You can even sprinkle a little blessed salt in our food while we're cooking. It's sort of like a pre-grace before meals, to God, bless it. But again, I will talk about blessed salt in that video about holy water. But you could use blessed salt for your home altar as well. Candles are a very common and a great thing to have. I would be happy to bless some candles for you. I blessed a whole bunch of candles. We distributed some on February 2nd, the Feast of the Presentation, called Candle Mass. If you have your baptismal candle, I wouldn't necessarily recommend burning your baptismal candle every day, because you don't want to use it up, most likely. Though you can, it wouldn't be wrong to, but it might be cool to have that there, and maybe just to light it on special occasions, maybe on the anniversary of your baptism, maybe on the feast of the baptism of the Lord. But whether you burn your baptismal candle or you have some other kind of blessed candles, a wonderful way to help focus our prayer. Incense, I know depending on where you live, you have to be careful with candles and with incense. You don't want to set off any alarms. I may have some experience setting off some smoke and fire alarms with incense in my day. But if you can and if you're able to, incense is another wonderful way to sort of set the tone. If you want some advice about incense, it's not cheap sometimes. You can ask me about it and I'll tell you what I think is some good stuff, especially bang for your buck for home incense. You could even have a bell. Maybe you could ring a bell, that auditory sense to sort of set the mood at the beginning of your prayer time. Again, if you live in an apartment and you might be annoying your neighbors, just be aware of our surroundings for some of these sacramentals that might impact others. And just like I said, that you might have your prayer material with you, have your rosary or your chaplet or your Bible, whatever going to be taking up the bulk of your prayer time right there at your home altar. I asked some of my brothers at King's College to share with me some of their home altars and icon walls, and a couple of them very generously shared a couple things just to give you some ideas for your own home altar. So this is part of the icon wall from Father Tony Grasso, who teaches in the English department. You can see some of the beautiful icons that are part of his icon wall in his prayer space in his room at King's. Especially wanted to draw attention to this beautiful icon of Our Lady of Sorrows, who is the patroness of the Congregation of Holy Cross. Father Russ McDougall, our superior, shared a couple images of his prayer spaces. So Father Russ has rosary, a chaplet. He has a chapki, which is what you pray the Jesus prayer with. He has a really neat candle holder here that he can light a tea light and put it under this holder here. He, of course, has an image of the Blessed Mother and the Christ Child. And then Father Russ even has a relic as part of his prayer space here. He has a relic of the founder of our order, Father Basil Moreau. Father Russ also shared with me his icon wall that he has over top his workspace. So you can see the top of his computer monitor here, and some of his favorite saints, some of his patron saints that he can look to while he's doing. I have a lot of prayer cards as part of mine. Prayer cards from the ordinations of some of my brothers in the community, some diocesan priests who are good friends of mine, and also the death cards for some of my brothers in Holy Cross. I have a little zoom in here to see some of the statues that I have. The center here is a statue of Saint Joseph, and it's Saint Joseph sleeping, because we know that God sent angels to speak to him while he was dreaming. And I have a devotion to Saint Joseph as one of the three principal patrons of the congregation, and as the principal patron of the Holy Cross Brothers. This is just a little prayer space that I have in the rectory for whenever I'm praying over here. I, of course, have a crucifix there. I have an image of Saint Brother Andre, image of the Blessed Mother. And then I have a little travel chalice and paten here, which are real. They're for a travel mass kit, but I have them there as a reminder to be grateful for my priesthood, that I have the privilege to pray for all of you whenever I offer the Eucharist. So the chalice and the paten there. So, in conclusion, what is the purpose for all of these home altars? A priest friend of mine once told me to think of it like this, that time is like an arrow, it's always advancing forward, but our attention also, we can point it and sort of focus on something, and we get to choose where to focus that. So our lives, no matter what, we're heading toward God. We're going to come and meet our God face to face someday. We're pointed toward Him. So having a home altar is a way to sort of point our attention and direct ourselves so that we can focus a little bit better, focus on some of those objects or items, and help us to focus our prayer as we look forward to our goal of meeting our God face to face.